in order for me to make the impact I want to make, I need scale. I want to sell hundreds of millions of dollars of coffee, not because I want to be super wealthy or whatever, but because that's how you make impact in an industry that was basically exploited people in our countries through volume and access to market. It sounds a little corny, but I felt like I was obligated to be like I always say, I would wake up some mornings and look outside my house, and there's a little boy my age picking up sticks to round up a bundle of sticks to go sell for $1. I did nothing to be born a block away or 2 blocks away. I didn't earn or maybe even deserve at that point in my life the place that I was given. So I felt like I had to spend my life earning it. To go from country to country, and what I remember most is you can just start over and life doesn't end. Like you can lose everything and kind of like still figure it out because you have family, you have your culture, you have your community.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Welcome to episode 391 of Café con Pam. El día de hoy, we have a conversation with Martin Mayorga, who is the visionary and founder behind Mayorga Coffee, the leading Latino forward coffee brand dedicated to sustainable agriculture and the empowerment of Latin American communities. Martin was born in Guatemala City to a Nicaraguan father and a Peruvian mother. Martin's early life was marked by resilience, and as his family faced upheavals, including losing everything to an earthquake in Guatemala and then leaving everything behind due to a revolution in Nicaragua. You'll hear all about this in the interview. This cross-cultural journey, spanning from Guatemala to Nicaragua to Costa Rica to Peru and eventually the US, exposed Martin to both the beauty and the hardships of Latin American life, ultimately inspiring his lifelong commitment to uplift and represent his people and heritage. Listeners, this conversation with Martin was a lot of fun. I could have talked to him for hours because he has stories to tell. He's been in business for a few decades now. And I mean, Martin was a pioneer in the direct to farmer connection because back in the 90s, early 2000s, I think, I mean, you'll hear it all in the interview. Martin saw an opportunity. And this is such a story. I think I would love to bring Martin back to kind of like keep exploring different things. I think he can give us lots of lessons on life and business because his story is really inspiring and there's so much depth about it. So I hope you enjoy the story as much as I did. Y bueno, sin más, here's my conversation with Martin Mayorga. Hola Martín, welcome to Café con Pam. ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, muy bien.
Qué bueno.
Día lindo aquí en Costa Rica.
I know. Is it like super warm year round?
Yeah, but
You have
it cools
rainy
off.
season.
We have rainy season. We're just coming off what feels like a very long rainy season, and especially the last 3 weeks have been rough. Like just didn't see sun for 3 weeks. So,
Oh, that's rough.
but it's still tropical,
Beautiful.
beautiful.
Yes,
Can't complain. Yeah.
totally. So the first question we always ask is, what is your heritage?
Well, my heritage, I like to say, is just Latin American because it's a little complex. My father was from Nicaragua, my mother from Peru, and I was born in Guatemala.
Okay.
I was only there a couple of years, and then I grew up in Nicaragua. From there, moved to Peru. I'm sorry, from there, moved to Costa Rica. From there, moved to Peru. Then we went to the States as refugees of the Nicaraguan Revolution when I was a kid.
Okay. How old were you?
Um, Eventually, when we got to the U.S., I was about 11. I was born in Guatemala, and there was a major earthquake. We slept in the car, didn't really know what to do. So my dad's like, "Well, I'm from Nicaragua. We're gonna just go live there." Then a revolution kicked off. Didn't leave the house for a year, and then we had to escape. Left everything behind. Came to Costa Rica. Had to leave after a year. Went to Peru. Just more stuff with the Shining Path and a lot of terrorism, a lot of violence. So we end up finally being allowed into the United States as refugees of the Nicaraguan Revolution.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. I'm the youngest of four.
You're the youngest.
I am.
Oof. So your siblings were older when you were doing all the moving.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because we lived the same life, but obviously we took different things from it based on, I think,
Totally.
just our ages.
100%. So when the earthquake happened in Guatemala, you were little.
I was pretty little. I was like 2. So I have like kind of visuals, but the biggest visual I had is standing outside in the ground feeling like it was water. That's like one of my first core memories,
Oh my gosh.
which is very unnatural, right? To kind of like literally not have steady ground under you.
That's wild.
Yeah, yeah. And then I remember we had a fish tank, and I remember that kind of exploding as like we were running out of the house. Um,
Whoa.
but yeah, I was pretty young in Guatemala. Nicaragua, I have a lot of memories, some challenging ones and some very good ones.
See, porque that's when the revolution started, no? So,
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time, and it seemed like I always say, your childhood is normal because it's all you know.
yes.
But when I came to the States and I would tell people about some of my childhood memories, one of them was, at night we would kind of hide because there was shooting and fighting, and sometimes we'd have to crawl into my parents' bathroom and kind of hide in the
Oh,
bathtub as my dad had, kind of kept watch. And in the morning, we'd go collect bullet shells. So I had a huge bag of bullet shells, and we would kind of trade bullet shells. And like AK-47 shells were normal. Then you find like a 44 Magnum. Like that was our currency as children of like instead of baseball cards. I mean, but
wow.
that's just what I knew. It was kind of
Totally.
normal for us. So yeah, no, it was intense. It was scary. We left in a very quick hurry. My parents told us we were going to Disney World. We drove to the Costa Rican border, ran out of the car, and just literally left everything. Left
Wow.
everything behind. Yeah.
And how old were you there?
Then I was older. I mean, I was 8, 9.
Okay.
So definitely some memories there.
Yeah. Much more memories. Do you remember the shift when you got to Nicaragua and then when all of the conflict started?
I was too young to really understand when it transitioned.
Mm,
I started to understand it when we weren't allowed to leave the house. Literally, I mean, we didn't leave except during the daytime. Sometimes we'd go outside and play. Uh, and then really notice it when, we just like, I mean, we didn't go to school. We didn't do anything for a year. We were in the house.
wow.
And then obviously the shooting and, it created some issues for me growing up and actually generated a coffee blend around it because I created a imaginary friend, Muy Macho, who was like kind of like I guess what kept
Wow.
me, and I created it into a coffee blend. But yeah, I have a lot of memories from Nicaragua. Some are very good because I think before things got really hairy, um, my dad and I would drive north, and he'd buy cigars, and he was friends with a lot of the Cubans that had left their country to come find an opportunity in northern Nicaragua. Those are the memories that I really kind of held on to and that really brought me back around to want to do something with Nicaragua as I got older. So definitely a lot of good memories. I think, like I said, when you're little, what you know is just what you know, and what you see is just what you see. So I didn't realize how intense it was until later on in life.
Totally. So from Nicaragua, then you go to where? Ecuador?
Costa Rica. We just drove to the border.
Right. You drove to the border and you left everything in Nicaragua.
Exactly. And, I think they basically allowed Nicaraguans to come, uh, but I think they capped it to a year because they couldn't sustain. So it's a pretty small country.
Aparte que, sí, que Costa Rica es muy chiquito.
Sí, sí. Entonces it was like, hey, well, we understand what's going on, and we'll give you a year. And then we went to Peru because my mom's from there and she has family. Um, but all along, my dad didn't work. We didn't have income. My dad was trying to figure out how to make ends meet. Um, we got to Peru, same thing. My dad didn't really have opportunity there. And frankly, it was a very violent time then too. It
En
was during
Perú.
Sendero Luminoso, the whole Shining Path thing. I remember the lights would go out all the time because they bombed the power plants. You really couldn't go into Lima uh, that much because there was a lot of petty theft and violence. So it was just like my childhood was very tumultuous. Again, I didn't really realize it until I got to the States and it was like, whoa, this is like peace. And that's where I really noticed like, okay, I have two different lives in a way. Like the
Yeah.
life of who I was as a child and what really created the inner me, and then this like future life of like a lot of opportunity and like it just I didn't realize how cool that was until I was graduating college and I made a big shift. But yeah, I mean it's basically there's the countries that made me who I am, and then the country that's given me the opportunity to develop
Mm.
myself and really give back, which is really what I'm focused on.
And one of the things that you mentioned is when your Nicaraguan dad was in Peru, how he was struggling with, like, opportunities and whatever. I think some things that we don't talk about, because there's the immigration conversation right now happening, is how difficult it is for migration patterns to happen in Latin America. It's really hard. Like, the process, like the legal process, is just really difficult, and I don't think people realize how difficult it is.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize too that sometimes it's either a lateral move economically
Mhm.
or even downward, depending on the country you're moving to and from. Because ultimately, we're not talking about major economies unless you're
Right.
talking Mexico, Brazil. So you're kind of, what's the saying? You jump from the fire into the pan, or whatever what that saying is. You're kind of just like surviving, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that's a lot of immigration and emigration within Latin America, which is like the trade offs. There's trade offs, right? I think that's why
Mhm.
it's like, okay, well, the U.S. it's a massive economy. There's opportunity, you know. Obviously, my family saw that and wanted it. We obviously pursued a very legal route to get here. But yeah, it's difficult. And I'll be honest, I think getting to the US was even more difficult once we were there because my dad being Nicaraguan, having been through the revolution, thinking about the 80s during the Cold War, he was associated with potentially being part of the Communist Party just because he was Nicaraguan and just because we come from Nicaragua.
Yes.
So nobody would hire him for a long time, for years. So, you know, we came to this country with great opportunity, but those doors were slammed shut for a long time, a very long time. And we're talking about a man who left his life in Leon, Nicaragua as two sons of a single mom and pursued a better life for himself in the US through education and learning English and got some degrees. So he's like, wow, I'm in the US where I studied. I can now like that he was shut out for a long, very long time. So it was a mixed bag, right? As far as like these great opportunities. But for my dad, unfortunately, he struggled his whole life and he died struggling. And
Mm,
you know, it's kind of the shift that I wanted to make as somebody who I think benefited from all his efforts and sacrifices.
totally. Where in the US did you land?
Well, originally Miami. We spent a lot of time in Little Havana, and again, I created a coffee blend around it. My Cafe Cubano is based on the time with the Cubans, either in northern Nicaragua or in Little Havana, because the smell and the taste of the Cuban coffee and the cortaditos and just that whole vibe and cigars, like
Yes.
it just that to me was like this weird like freedom, yeah, culture and all these things kind of combining. That's why I created Cafe Cubano. I mean, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Um, so it's funny because I look back and I didn't realize that as I build my company, the blends I create are really kind of a part of my storyline.
Connected.
Yeah.
Totally.
But yeah, Miami was, you know, again, it was also 80s and it was during the cocaine wars and a lot of violence. But to me, I remember my aunt and uncle who lived there were like, don't leave the house. I'm like, this is nothing,
You
you
don't know
know,
what you've
after what,
seen. Yes.
yeah. So to me, it was just great. It was, you know, it was the States. That's all that mattered. We were in the United States.
Mm. And I mean, now that you can reflect back, what was the moment when earlier you mentioned, whoa, this is peace? What was that moment when you realized, oh, this is peace?
There was two moments. Number one, crossing the border into Costa Rica. It was like walking to another dimension. The roads were smooth. There was greenery. There was just it wasn't chaos. It wasn't like you know there was a lot of chaos in Nicaragua because there was literally a war going on. So that was a big one for me. And then I think landing to Miami Airport, having not seen a U.S. major airport before, I just remember being like, and I'll never forget the parking lot. For some reason, that parking lot and all those cars, and it just like this is just such a different scale. So I think those two moments that were very transitionary for me uh, were very important.
Totally. Did you have any reference, like movies, TV, or that you were like, oh, I'm there?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I watched Batman and all the like superhero stuff, but nothing's the same as when you see it in real life, and you have this this kind of like opposing dual experiences. Or one of my major experiences, and again, one of the major reasons why I started my business was at a market, seeing the poverty and seeing the farmers themselves basically begging and trying to like just sell whatever little things they could grow, and seeing people with money being able to buy whatever they wanted. So
Mm.
it was like a very interesting series of like
Contrast.
these contrasts that were so wild. Coffee farmers who were like poor and struggling. Then I go to Miami and people are drinking their coffee and living it up. And I'm like, how is this the same planet? It was just, as a kid, I was like, something doesn't add up here.
And you mentioned your dad. Did he inspire you to decide to start a business, or what was that catalyst?
He literally did in two ways. Number one, we had our issues relationship wise, but I got to say that the guy had guts. The guy at 16 was like,
Mm.
if I stay in Leon, Nicaragua, my life is here and that's it. And he went to a church, and there was a priest that offered him to go to Michigan to learn English, and he put himself into a place of higher education, got some degrees, became an economist.
That's big.
Yeah, that risk at 16, which is ironic because I did that at 16 too, but in a much easier scenario. Um, but then to go from country to country, and what I remember most is you can just start over and life doesn't end. Like you can
Mm.
lose everything and kind of like still figure it out because you have family, you have your culture, you have your community. And it really was a big thing that really stuck with me. And he just kind of always kept going. I mean, it's funny because I think my son sees me as like super like stoic, like very, I feel like a child compared to what my dad went through.
Did you ever see him like when you say he struggled his whole life? But did you ever see him like with his head down, or was he always like very strong?
He was always strong. He had his issues. He turned to alcohol and some
Mm.
aggressiveness. But I always forgave him for it because I realized like he had a tough life,
Well,
and
and they don't have tools.
yeah, yeah, and his life, and to have at least put me in a place where it's like, hey, I got you to the U.S. Like take it from here. That's kind of how I see it. And, like I'm always appreciative of that.
And so, at what point did you decide you started noticing the contrast? So you moved to the U.S., you see the Cubans with their cortadito, but then you remember the farmers, and you start like noticing the contrasting like scenarios, or kind of like almost different worlds or different. Ay, ¿cómo se llama? In the what I'm imagining in my head is the superheroes, like different dimensions,
Yeah,
like
yeah, I know what you're saying with all these.
like the multi-universe, like
Yeah, the
different
different.
universes at the
Yeah.
same time, and so vastly different. At some point, when do you say, "Okay, I'm going to do something about it"?
When I was 21, no, actually, I was younger. I was like 18 or 19. So actually, I can do the math. It was in 1990. So I would have been 17, 1991. So 17, 18. I went back to Nicaragua with my dad. Violeta Chamorro had just won the first democratic election in like 40 years. Um, I'm thinking things are looking up, in this country's, I haven't been here in X years. Think it was worse. It was worse than when we left. Obviously, it had been ravaged by a revolution, by a government that just like to help themselves to things. And that hit me. And that hit me, honestly, with a lot of guilt,
Mm.
where here I'd been living my life as an Americanized kid, fighting to kind of erase my accent, avoiding friends coming over to smell the food that my mom cooks. And, just like I felt a lot of guilt in that moment of like, I turned my back on the places and the people that had really allowed me to be where I was. And
Mm.
where I was, studying I wanted to go to Wall Street and be this kind of wealthy finance guy. That hit me going back. And then I ended up going to Georgetown to study finance because I wanted to be a Wall Street guy and do all these things. And then I was like, I just couldn't do it. I just was like, and I'd been going back to Nicaragua like every 6 months or so with my dad. And I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something with these countries. And almost as like I owe it to somebody, to God, to the community, to my dad, to
The
everybody.
land, yeah.
Yeah, to do something. So I started going back and I started getting into the cigar business. I actually dropped out of college, had about a semester left to get my degree. I turned down an
Oh,
offer to go to Wall Street and make a lot of money. And I slept in the back of a cigar factory in Esteli, Nicaragua. And I learned everything I could about cigars and the process and the people and the culture. And I loved it. It was
why cigars?
that, again, was a connection for me. It was something I did with my dad, going up
Because you
north and
used to
buying
go
cigars.
get cigars from him, with
Yeah.
him.
you
Mm-hmm.
kind of go to what you know a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I just started dabbling, and I gotta give it to like the Cubans, the Plasencia family, and the Pedro, and all these people were so open to this young guy, like just wanting to be there to learn. I developed a cigar line. I got very lucky because there was like a cigar boom in the mid '90s
Mm-hmm.
out of nowhere, where everybody decided to start smoking cigars, which is kind of random. Um, and I developed my line, and I was doing well with it. I was doing distribution with a big company called JR Cigars. We were, top brand in the country. But as I was in the valleys for tobacco, I would also spend time in the mountains where the coffee was growing. And I ran into a family friend who I refer to as an uncle, which in Latin America,
Mm-hmm.
close family friend, Theo.
Todo el mundo es tu tío.
So he had this nice big farm. I said, "How's it going?" He's like, "I don't know. I think I'm just going to abandon it." And I said, "Well, why would you abandon such a nice farm that produces so much great product?" He said, "I can't make money." And I couldn't understand, as a young person in the US that sees all these people spending all this money on
Right.
coffee, how you don't make money on something that. And he literally, and I wish I had this like paper towel napkin. He drew out the supply chain, and he showed me how crazy it was just for him to get his coffee to a consumer, and how far out of the process he is, and how basically he gets no added value.
All the in-between hands.
Yeah, I mean, either Coyote comes to pick it up, or I mean, there's just a lot, and a lot of the games of financing and discounting and rebate. There's just a lot of like shell games played there, and I'm young and maybe a little arrogant. I'm like, well, I'll just sell it for you in the U.S. And this is by the mid '90s. I'm running my cigar business. I'm making some money. I think I can figure everything out. And I have to be honest, I did, and it was easy. And I said, well, because what I did is I started selling to roasters in the U.S. And I noticed two things. I noticed, A, there's a great opportunity to
Mm.
develop a very strong direct supply chain. But B, I realized that roasters didn't really care about producers, and that somebody needed to. So I realized, well, they won't buy from me, because I literally had coffee roasters say, well, we just buy out of New York. And I was like, you realize there's no coffee farms in New York,
Right.
right? But they felt safe that the traders and all this stuff was in place for them to just draw from New York and not have any risk. Um,
Okay, hold on. How old are you? 18?
no, then I was in my early, like 20.
20 something.
Yeah,
In the 90s.
2021. Yeah.
So there's no internet really. I mean, a little
No,
bit.
I'd have to go to like I'd have to tell people to call me at the hotel at a certain time, or
Right.
send a very slow fax.
Totally. So I just want to paint the picture. How does Martin, 20 something year old Martin, like, yes, in your head, you're like, I can sell it for you. Of course, you had already built the cigar business, but the coffee industry is vast. And like, talking about that supply chain, there's 50,000 hands in between. How do you know who to call first?
There's something to be said for not knowing much, right? Where you don't know too much, you're just kind of like, well, who needs coffee? People who roast coffee. Okay, who roast
Okay.
coffee? And back then there weren't that many coffee roasters, so I just called roasters, and I have to give it to a couple pretty large players. I think they just saw the economics make sense. They're like, well, it's cheaper. What happened? What I saw is the little guys didn't want to take the risk, so I became a roaster after that. But I think there's two things. Number one, clearly through my childhood, I learned that my risk tolerance probably became a lot
Mm-hmm.
broader than most,
Totally.
because of what I lived through and what I saw that you can live through and still kind of come ahead. Um, and then I felt the calling. I felt and it sounds a little corny, but I felt like I was obligated to be like I always say, I would wake up some mornings and look outside my house, and there was a little boy my age picking up sticks to round up a bundle of sticks to go sell for $1.
Mm,
I did nothing to be born a block away or 2 blocks away.
yeah.
I didn't earn, or maybe even deserve at that point in my life, the place that I was given. So I felt like I had to spend my life earning it.
So good. So, okay. So you pick up the phone and you call the roaster and you're like, hey, I have some coffee for you. You usually get it from New York. How about like we do a more direct type of thing? How did your background, because you studied numbers.
Mhm.
So how did your background influence and helped this? Because I think that's big.
You're talking the '90s, where look, I always say like I missed the boat on being Latino because it's kind of cool now, right? It wasn't cool then. It was like,
Yes.
who's this kid from Latin America? Like to them, I'm Mexican. They don't know, right? In the '90s, it was like
Y Mayorga, aparte. How do English people say it? Mayorga?
Mayoraga. I get Mayoraga,
Mayoraga. Oh,
and I get so bothered. I'm like, can you just stop and sound it out? Because like you
right.
literally just follow the
There's no
sequence.
A.
Exactly. So I think a lot of it was cool and authentic, right? Like here's this guy from this country, and he's bringing like it just wasn't happening back then. Like you said,
Mm.
there was no cell phones. There was like so for me to accomplish that, it was challenging. I mean, I don't like to brag much, but I am kind of the first person to bring this kind of direct supply chain coffee, importing into the marketplace.
It wasn't a thing.
No, no, not at all. I mean, Starbucks was still just kind of emerging. This was
Totally.
not like so. This whole direct trade and buy from, and it's still not really a thing. We could eventually
Hmm.
get into the details of that because it's a lot of marketing. But yeah, I just kind of felt like, look, I have a thing of if I have a saying like, look, everything you see around you was created by somebody, and nothing makes them better, smarter. Like it's just like what's in your heart and like what you're willing to push through. And I just felt
Hmm.
that it was the right thing to do. And I do have a belief that when you believe in something, it's the right thing to do. It's what you need to
Make it
do.
happen.
You know, you asked about my dad and his influence. I mean, one of the things that he really influenced me on when I first was telling him about the whole coffee thing, and we are in the DC area where he was living and I was living. I told him about that day. He said, "Well, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Go do it." And that was just his thing. It's like the
Wow.
second it's in your head, you better be taking action, or else you're just all talk.
Okay.
And I did it, and to his credit, I listened to him and I went out there and I, started the process.
What happened to the cigars?
I sold it. I sold it to JR Cigars. We were doing about 3.5 million cigars per year. We were, a pretty respected value brand because that's a big belief of mine. And I sold it outright to JR Cigars in 2001. They're still being sold. There's still Mayorga cigars out there. It's kind of cool to see.
Nice.
Yeah.
How fun. And so, were there any, like, you take the risk? You're 20 something. You're like, okay, we're going to do this coffee thing. No one's ever done it. Like, there's no blueprint, certainly. The industry is probably pretty tight already because, that's how it's always quote worked, quote. And how does your family relate? Because you're the youngest. So did people like your family or people around you were like, are you sure you want to, like, you dropped out
Yeah.
of college? Are you sure about this coffee thing?
Look, I always say like my timing's terrible. Like I should have been born like 20 years later because even so, like dropping out of college and starting a business, what's now known as being an entrepreneur,
I know.
you were kind of a loser back then. Like I was not like I was this great guy doing like what a loser. This guy leaves college like I was literally. I mean, I remember seeing people from high school out and like it was kind of a joke. I was kind of like this guy who couldn't get his act together to start a career and like so it was not looked well upon. And my family didn't look well upon it either, especially my dad being a formal, educated, who, Latinos, because of our limited options in our countries, we believe in education being like the holy grail of how to escape or achieve or whatever it is. So to not follow education in a trajectory through a corporate structure, I was a loser. I mean, the whole thing of entrepreneurship is hilarious to me now because I was like, man,
Yes.
I was a total loser for what I did to people. Now it would be the coolest thing ever, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, it was not easy and it was very lonely and more lonely because I also spent all my time working. I mean, I tell people all the time for almost 10 years, I literally didn't take one day off, meaning 7 days a week, 365 days a year for just short of 10 years. Had my wisdom teeth pulled in the morning, got to the office from there, took my painkillers, had the flu, took it like I couldn't stop, and like you said, there's a structure, there's a system, there's a good old boy club, much more then than now. And opportunities were just not easily handed over. You have to really fight for them.
How many times were you rejected? How many times were you rejected before you got your first yes?
Look, it was an interesting thing. I think because what I was doing was very interesting, because I was ahead of my time, we got a lot of press. Here's this Latino, which is very exotic to be
Right.
Latino and actually have a business. So I got some press, and I think we got a little momentum there. So I got a lot of love from community, from people, from
Mm.
and then local, on the local side. And I think it was more value in economics that what I was doing was actually good business too. On the corporate side, I had no chance. We got rejected and taken advantage of and used. And I think I've formally been bankrupt 4 or 5 times over the first 15 years that I started. Um, but yeah, it was not easy by any means. I think you see me now at 52 almost in a couple months. I'm doing okay now, but I don't think if you told me now that I could go back to that age and do it again, I couldn't do it. And if you told me my son had to go through it, I beg him not to do it. It's
Mm.
taken years off my life, I think, and it's affected relationships and friendships, and it's a big commitment.
When did you start a family? During those 10 years?
And no, kind of. I had my daughter at 30.
So you were
My
in the
son was
grind.
born. Yeah, so I was, and I think the 10-year gap.
Mm-hmm.
That 10-year was ended by my daughter's birth, and I made a commitment
Oh,
to my ex-wife. I made a commitment to her that I would take Sundays off to be with my daughter.
Sundays.
Sundays, yeah.
Just one day.
Yeah, look, maybe I'm old school, maybe I'm too Latino, but it's like I need to figure out how to provide, and I need to figure out how to create stability, and you know, if my daughter was being taken care of, then I need to go figure out how to create the long term taking care of the family.
So knowing what you know now, if you were to go back to that 20-year-old Martin who was in the 90s, no Rolodex, just like an idea and a dream and hopes and esperanza, what are the three things you would tell him? But don't tell me. Let's take a coffee break and then you'll tell me.
Okay.
Sabrosura pa' ti que que.
Okay, so let's talk about coffee. So I'm drinking the Mayan blend that you sent me. Thank you so much.
Of course.
It's so good. It's medium roast, so I made a latte. And it's whole bean coffee, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. So it's a blend.
Yeah.
So then we also got the Cubano.
The Cubano. That's our bread and butter.
Yes, so the Cubano, which is dark roast. This one I'll probably make it like Cubano in the Greca.
Yeah. A lot of people drink a drip. You can prepare it how you want, but it's got that kind of syrupy sweetness. Yeah.
And then we also got the winter blend,
hmm
which is sweet vanilla and cocoa. So this is a little bit more like seasonal.
Yeah, it's our seasonal dark roast. It's very similar to Cubano, but not Cubano, obviously. And
Mm-hmm.
it's our seasonal that, frankly, I've thought, well, if you drink that, you might as well drink Cubano, but our customers really like it and we keep it alive.
Totally. When it like this one makes me think of like, I don't know, en la tarde un cafecito, like this
Yeah.
one. And the Cubano is more
Especially in the
like
Northeast where our facility is, or it's chilly and you want to kind of warm up with something.
totally. But I really love. I'm a medium roast person, and so I was very excited for the Mayan blend. Can't wait to try the other ones though, because I have all the concoctions. I'm a terrible barista. I'm a terrible barista when I make lattes because I don't like wasting milk, and so I make the
Yeah.
flour, and then I'm like, oh, but there's so much milk left. Brr, done, so it looks terrible. But thank you for the coffee. How do you drink your coffee?
I'm varied, right? So I'll drink like a light roast natural, which is a very kind of hipster thing to do. But I also drink a Cubano muy macho. We just launched our Buenos Dias. So I just, it's fun because people ask me my favorite coffee, and I think for me, a lot of it has to do with what I know, meaning like you held that Mayan bag and it's a blend, but it's a blend of all the producers I know and support. It's Capucos from Honduras. It's, our producer in Nicaragua. It's everybody that we know and work with. So for me, it's like there's so much more meaning to it that
Mm-hmm.
it's like kids, right? Like, I don't know which of my kids I love the
What am I
most.
feeling like today?
Right. So
Yes.
it's just exactly, do I feel like having something light? Do I feel like something? So it's just a matter of preference.
Mm. Do you have a morning ritual with your coffee?
I have a morning ritual because I wake up every morning by 4:30. I get up.
4:30. I'm a
Yeah.
5:30 person. I don't know. Naturally, I wake up at 4:30, but I force myself to go back to bed. Maybe I should get up. Are you super
Well,
productive?
naturally, I wake up at 3 and I force
Oh
myself
my
to
gosh.
4:30. So I wake up, I do my little prayer in the morning. I put on my gym clothes to make sure I'm in the mindset that I'm going to work out today. I go down, I hand grind my coffee because I feel like I should work for it. So I have a little hand grinder and I hand grind it. Um, I start brewing my pot of coffee and then I get situated on the sofa. And I have a process of reviewing uh, my financial statements, current financial statements, budget for the business,
Every
current
day.
financial every morning, every morning.
Okay.
And then my vision financially for the family, my vision of like things to do with the family. So it's just like this process of kind of just visualizing the business part of life. And then doing a little work, and then I go for a run or a walk. I come back, I do a cold plunge. So I have a very kind of disciplined morning. And like I always say, I'm not disciplined. I'm actually very lazy by default. But I've learned that I have to be disciplined, so I force it. So it's like people are like, "How are you so disciplined?" I'm like, "I'm not."
You
I
just have a
put things
list
on
that
my
you follow.
calendar. Yeah, I literally put it on my calendar, and like I tell my son, like if it's on my calendar, it's happening, because then I'm
Hmm.
disappointing myself and I'm letting myself down. So once I know what I have to be doing, I put it on the calendar, and it's like I got to do it.
I have to
Calendar
have
says
it.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think one of my core values is integrity, and so I see a lot of integrity with if you say you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it. If it's on the
yeah.
calendar, it needs to happen, and it is kinda, like, annoying. That happens to me when I'm, like same, if I put it on my calendar, I have to do it, and it's very, like, annoying if I don't. So sometimes I just move it. Still on the
Hey, it's still on the
calendar.
calendar, just later.
Yeah, it's just tomorrow.
That's funny.
So tell us about the code
Yes, so there's a discount code. It's Martin 15. That's Martin 15, and it's a 15% discount.
on Mayorga Coffee.
Here's this, and you can get a 15% discount on all our nice coffees that we import through the Port of Baltimore from all our producers. We roast it at our facility in Maryland, and we'll roast it up and pack it up and ship it to you.
How fun. So listeners, use the code Martin15 at Mayorga. Well, we'll have all the shows, all the links and
Yeah,
the show notes, and I'll ask you later.
it's MyOrgaCoffee.com. Pretty easy, but
Amazing. So excited. Thank you. Thank you
yeah,
for the coffee.
thank
Let's get
you.
back to the show. Okay, so before we went on break, I said if you were to go back to your 20-year-old self,
Uh-huh.
mhm, then what would be the 3 to 5 things you would tell him to do? Knowing what you know now, you have a conversation with young Martin. Scrappy, he's making it happen.
I think the biggest one will be accept that you have to market, because I've been so anti-marketing. This is the first year in 27 years in business that I've put together a marketing budget.
Oh, what?
You mentioned the word integrity, and I feel like there's a lot of disingenuous activities when people turn into something that to me is as human and personal and important as coffee communities. And then when you market that, like to me, it's gross. It's just like,
Ooh, I teach marketing, so this is very exciting.
yeah. So I've also realized like, hey, my goal is to sell more coffee for my producers. And if you're in a marketplace and you want to sell stuff, you're going to have
Yep,
to market.
yep.
Um, I think honestly, beyond that, I don't look back and say, do this differently, do that differently. I think, maybe invest in relationships a little more. I think I
Mm,
let a lot of relationships fall by the wayside, because I've been so just tunnel vision. But I gotta say, like, life's got trade offs, unfortunately. And to me, the trade off of making real impact and developing new relationships with producers and the people that are on my team now. And so I don't know. I mean, I always say, look, one of the things that I believe is super important is never live with regrets.
mhm.
So I feel like I make decisions. I have a philosophy where I'm in a crossroads in any part of my life. I say, okay, I'm 80 years old on my deathbed. What does that 80-year-old man want to see as the storyline here? And I feel like that's been a really good kind of compass for me. And I do feel good about my decisions. I've made mistakes. I've, not always been the best at, being a friend or a husband or whatever it might be. But yeah, I think that, and it's just like believe in what you believe and live your life to it, and be congruent, be
Mm,
authentic, be And I feel that I am, and I've lost myself sometimes. You start making a little money, you start wanting nicer things, and you have to kind of. But I think that's it. It's basically, be yourself. If you want to grow, you're gonna have to deal with marketing
Yes,
and understand that relationships can be sacrificed based on where your time is allocated. And if you care about relationships, put more time into them.
for sure. One of my teachers, Kelly Deals, she said this, and because for me, I teach marketing, and so my background is in marketing, and so I have like it's kind of like at my core, and marketing my business is always annoying. Same, you know. And so Kelly said, sales are the breath of business,
Yeah.
and that like sales are the breath, like 4 words or whatever. It made me just shift so much my idea of why am I not marketing, because that means I'm suffocating my business.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's an interesting kind of duality for me because one of the things, knock on wood, that I've been blessed with over the last 10, 12 years is we're not wanting for more sales, meaning we have very good relationships with, I think, the people that understand business and brand strategy, the Costco's, Amazon's, Whole Foods, some of our clients that we do very good business with, understand it enough to the point that we kind of have this, like, I think my growth over last year is about 35%. And
Nice.
we always grow. And, I'm very private about our sales, but I'll just say we're between 50 and $100 million. And, my target is closer to $350 million in revenue. But what I'm missing is brand recognition on the consumer level.
Yes.
So where we are, we do very well. Um, I have to say, though, here's the challenge, and maybe you can, maybe between you, a therapist, and somebody can help me. I feel so like I'm giving up some of my ethics and values when I take something so real and something so honest as me wanting to support these producers who are marketed as less than as the norm in my industry.
Mm,
And I don't ever see them and want them to think that I see them as less than. And so you have this kind of immediate thought process in marketing of coffee, which is, well, let's talk about lifting up. Let's talk about giving back. And to me, it's like, these are people I see right here with me, eye to eye. These are my people. I can't market them like that, and I would never do it. So, and trust me, I've burnt through marketing firms because they all want to do that. They want the poor farmer with the dejected. I'm like, these are brilliant people who are the true artisans of my industry. I'm
mm.
not here to. So I think that's a duality I'm working on. And actually, I just engaged a branding agency that's the first one to, I think, get it. We'll see.
Nice.
Time will tell. They're Latinos and they're from these countries, and that was a big thing that I saw. That's like, and that is, there are certain criteria that I put there, which is like, there's certain words I won't use, and we're never here to act like we're better than or doing something they can't do for themselves. We're just different parts of the supply chain, but we're the same as everything and everything else. But yeah, marketing is.
It's really fun. So I don't think you need to. I actually I would disagree to want to put the farmers in this like lower like place, because why? I mean, they're humans, and I think retaining their humanity could be totally shared through storytelling. Like I would love, like there's a in this Mayan coffee, there's a picture of someone.
Who's that? Oh yeah, yeah, from Honduras. Yeah,
I mean, I would love to learn like this. It would be awesome if Mayorga Coffee share like this is Juan, who
yeah,
started with like one house, and because of the work that we've done together, now his kids are going to school, and like it's the storytelling piece around it that I think would like I want to buy more coffee from him. Let's take
yeah. No, that's what we're doing now, and we hired a social media person who lives in Mexico, and I have an agronomist who lives in Mexico, and we're doing a lot more of that. And like I say to people, look, if I'm going to market, I'm going to do it by just documenting rather than creating.
totally. And people love stories.
Yeah, yeah, and we have. I could tell you stories of.
I'm
I,
sure.
I mean, people tell me I should write a book between. Yeah, I have a lot of interesting things that have happened. You go to these countries, some of them are not. Yeah, you have a lot of different stories to tell after the years.
I bet. So, given that you have a very strong background in numbers and you just walked us through your morning routine and how like I love that you have your money morning days every day. I have money, I probably you're inspiring me to switch it because I have money Mondays where Mondays I like my numbers, but I should make it like a morning money day like every day.
Yeah, yeah. I just think every day, everything we do is going to accumulate into where we end up.
So, given that strong background in numbers, when you were building the business, I mean, you already mentioned that marketing was kind of like meh, on the side. How did you decide the business model?
It was sort of decided for me. I kind of threw everything at it, thinking like, if someone's going to buy, sell to them. So we were doing business with these massive, what they call contract feeders that set up at universities and corporate, and we were selling to them, and they had rebate programs. We were selling to grocery stores. I was selling to mom and pops. And then I started realizing, well, these guys aren't paying me on time. These guys aren't paying me at all. These people are discounting me to the death to the point I don't make money. And then I was opening shops. And then I started kind of running out of money and not being able to pay my bills. And, so I think what happened in the early years, which is like first 10 or so, which is like necessity forced me into the right business model.
Mm,
And obviously some intelligence, insight, and formal education in finance. And I've taken that lesson where now when I see the canary in the coal mine of like, hey, this direction, if X, Y, and Z happens, could go the wrong direction, I'm very good at pivoting ahead of time. Um,
nice.
so what I learned was, in order for me to make the impact I want to make, I need scale. I want to sell hundreds of millions of dollars of coffee, not because I want to be super wealthy or whatever, but because that's how you make impact in an industry that was basically exploited people in our countries through volume and access to market. I'm not going to do it by buying the super special little micro lots. I'm going to do it by buying the coffee that everybody likes to drink every day. I can make it better. I can make it more affordable to them, and I can do it in a way that helps people. Um, so really, I mean, that's the business model, and doing that at scale through wholesale. And now that we have so many opportunities to go wide with direct to consumer, that's also obviously another one where one of the biggest things I learned. I talk about being in the coffee industry. I don't feel that I am. I think the industry itself has no interest in helping producers or being fair to consumers. Right? The industry wants to be profitable. All I need is my consumers, my team, and my farmers. And I've seen that formula has always guided me in the right direction. Right. My customers have always supported us. I have very loyal customers once they find us. I've done a terrible job. I always say I make people work so hard to find out who we are, but once they do, they love us, right? It
Yeah.
takes them, 3 or 4 touch points with us to be like, wait, these people are legitimate. This is real. This coffee's great. Wait, this coffee is actually a lot more affordable than similar quality at much higher prices. But they work for it. And my goal now is to not make them work as hard for it through marketing.
So, on that note, what do you want to be known for? So, when somebody thinks of Mayorga Coffee, because we have, do I want to mention other brands? I don't know. I mean, we have the yellow can, yellow
Please.
and red.
I'll talk about anybody and anything. The yellow can that is owned by a jelly company that puts us
Yeah,
up as being
very
Latino.
popular.
Yeah. If you like jelly and your little Uncrustables, then go support. There's a Latino brand that is owned by
That is
the
not
most
Latino brand.
non-Latino company in the
Correct.
world. Right.
And so, when people think of Mayorga Coffee, what do you want people to think about?
I want to, and my vision for my life spent in this industry is to break this premise that Latinos can't be top quality and focus on health and sustainability. I think that yellow can is a perfect example of it. Let's talk about dancing and music and yeah, that's us. But you know what? We're very capable. We're artisans. We're good business people. We care about the planet. We care about each other. And I think, unfortunately, there's been systems in society issues that have pulled those things apart. And it's either you're Latino or you're quality and sustainable. And
Mm.
if you see the Latino brands that are out there, I think they're playing into that. And then honestly, it bothers me because I am Latino, but I'm also somebody who very much cares about quality, very much cares about the environment, very much cares about producers. And so my legacy in this business is to create this into a national brand that is known for those things, coexisting, because right now they're thought to be at odds with each other, and it's not true.
Mm, I love that. Where can people find Mayorga Coffee?
Well, MayorgaCoffee.com is probably the easiest. We're in Costco's all up and down the East Coast and sometimes nationally, depending on the time of year. We're on Amazon, Costco.com. And then we have our socials, Mayorga Coffee on Instagram and on TikTok. So all the
Fun.
usuals.
You're all over the marketing channels now.
Yeah, now the big thing is that I'm being told I need to be doing. Like I just literally yesterday, I think like I had my account public in about a year and a half ago. I made it private and deleted like 12,000 followers. And I just kept, my philosophy was if I run into you somewhere, will I come up and say hi to you and start a
Right.
conversation? So that turned like over 12,000 followers into like 120. And then yesterday I was convinced again to make it public and to kind of share my life as a founder of a business. And look, I think it's important because something I think it's very important to acknowledge that I struggle with is I'm a product of the American dream. I am the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is people aren't seeing that because they see a guy who's older, who is financially successful, who speaks English very well. Um, and I want people to see that, you can be the young immigrant who had to come to the States, learn English, not like that's who so I'm kind
Who's
of,
collecting bullet shells?
yeah. And I want people in their 20s to look at me and say, hey, this is a path that is very attainable. And I want to motivate others to do the same in coffee or in anything, live up to their full potential.
I love that. So I have some business questions now
Sure.
because I'm a life coach and I work with a lot of Latinas actually who are building businesses. And some of the biggest challenges is scaling
Mhm.
because especially when you care. So you talk about the marketing challenge of like I don't want to like dilute who is behind the story because of like, to make it marketable. Similarly, it's like the challenges that people face is like, well, I don't want to dilute my brand. I can't trust people to run it for me. What would you say to that?
Look, I believe that nobody can tell their story better than themselves, right? And my friends who own successful businesses that are brand based, we all have the same thing. Like, look, the founder is going to tell the best story. And the problem is we don't see how good our story is. When I talk to people about my trajectory, my history, like even my own staff, like that's crazy. So, and I don't think anyone will have the same passion and no one will have the same tolerance for risk taking too. I'll say stuff if you follow me on LinkedIn, which you should. I'll say stuff that my marketing person's like, oh my God, I can, like, and you heard me, I'll talk about competitors. I'll always be honest and talk factually. And I think that authenticity is something that the world needs, and I think brands need, and I think people deserve if they're going to consume your product. So, you know, I'm an introvert. I don't like to be on social media, but I will speak honestly always. And I think every founder should. And I think that we should propagate a movement where people follow and support individuals and individuals that come together to build a company rather than a brand and a concept, which is really what corporate has become.
Mm-hmm. Like revenues, profits.
Yeah, and then the brand becomes a thing. Like what is Starbucks? Who is Starbucks? What is, you know, whatever brand, Dove, whatever brand you can think of, it's just a thing. And I think we need humanity to be brought into the business world, and founders need to pursue, push that narrative.
So you talked about también the fair trade, like how there's like a lot of things that are not true that we are led to
I didn't say
believe.
that word, those two words, just for the record. And by the way, it's
I'm
not two
saying that
words.
word.
It's words put together, which makes it the trademark. It's a whole very nebulous thing, but it's a concept.
Yes. So what do people need to know about making sure that especially coffee because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
What do people like how could people make sure that the coffee they are consuming is the best coffee that will ultimately actually will pay the people who grew it and the land?
It's a very tough question to answer. because honestly, here's the problem. I think as Americans, we like to believe in certifications, and we like to
Mm-hmm.
believe that there's some magical agency out there that if somebody puts something on a bag, that it's true, or else some government, like that's not the case. The government cares about like basic things like you disclose the weight and the contents. Like,
Yes.
so unfortunately, I think it's a very tough time for consumers because I don't believe in certifications other than the USDA organic, which is a very formal kind of necessary for traceability and everything. But I believe third party certifications are actually for lazy, disconnected coffee companies who don't want to get to know the producers, who don't want to engage the producers. Uh, my challenge is, well, are you seeing engagement from producers outward through this brand? Are you seeing empowerment of producers through relationship building? Are you seeing a company and a founder and a leadership team that is diverse and represents those cultures and communities? I think authenticity really shines the light on things. You know, you have some vanilla staff in Arkansas talking about all these great things. Or you can see through it. I think we have to stop relying on these. Look, third party certifications by and large are profit centers. Now they may be legally nonprofit, but they're making money and their leadership is getting paid well. And frankly, it's a burden on producers. If you think about it, producers have been taken advantage of, and this is something important for people to know. It's not just about paying producers. The real opportunity for people to exploit producers in coffee is through all the secondary and tertiary opportunities of financing coffee, putting certification requirements on them that cost money, buying their carbon credits at a discount to go resell them at a markup. People don't realize that this kind of shadow world lives behind coffee, the number two traded commodity in the world. It's not just the transaction where they get taken advantage of. It's mostly all the secondary opportunities that can be created through those transactions that they can attach to those transactions. And my opinion is a lot of certifications do just that,
Yeah.
but they paint themselves as this is the beacon of proving that X, Y, and Z is happening.
Mm.
Certification is just a group of people saying, let's create standards, let's check against them, and let's get paid to do it.
And it costs 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, we're running out of time, and I have so many more questions still.
I'm a fast speaker.
What's next for Mayorga Coffee? What can we expect coming soon besides you getting more out there and more marketing?
Yeah, you can see me on Martin.Mayorga on Instagram if you want to. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. The Look, we're expanding. We have we sell a lot of our producers' coffees from their farms specifically, but we developed a lot of really good blends that have a lot of purpose. We're developing kind of, instead of going deep on offerings of whole bean, we're creating then those same coffees in single serve and cold brew. We're developing a flavored line that's going to be very Latino inspired, and churros and all the things that we know and love as
Nice.
Latinos. So you're going to see us, number one, you're going to see us more through marketing. You're going to see more platform options of our products. And you're always going to see authenticity. I mean, you look for us on YouTube, you look for us on LinkedIn, you look for us on socials, you'll see 27 years of authentic engagement and hard work, and nothing will change on that front.
How fun. So exciting.
Yeah,
I'm so glad we learned about you because I didn't know.
I know. Very few people know. Even this. Look, I had a podcast. It depressed me because all I did was talk about all the challenges in Latin America with coffee. It was called Cultivating Change. And literally, I stopped because it would make me depressed. Because I was like, all I do is do the stuff for a living, and now I got to go talk about it. And I was like, this is a bummer. Like I gotta go out and.
Is it still out there?
I'm sure there's archives. Yeah, I mean, I think people found it interesting, but for me, it's like I do live this duality of like it's frustrating. It's frustrating to want to make an
Mm-hmm.
impact and see that there's an industry out there that says it wants to make an impact, could easily make an impact, but clearly doesn't want to. Um, and you have consumers who believe a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my battle.
Mm. Could you debunk? Because somebody once told me that coffee, speaking about standards, that there is a level, and not in whole bean, because this is whole bean, but like ground,
Hmm.
there's a standard that allows for a percentage of cockroaches in the coffee. And so there was a video floating that was like, "Did you know you're drinking roach like water, because if you're buying ground coffee, there's a percentage that the government allows of roaches to be in your coffee. And I was like, oh, but I could never like get it debunked. Do you know anything about it?
I think that's part of. Okay, so there's a FDA regulation that I think up to 5% of a product can contain not that product and say it and not have to disclose
Mm.
it, right? So I think that's part of that, and then I think it's just kind of scare tactics in marketing.
Totally. I mean, I'm still drinking coffee.
If you do the math and you could have up to 5% of something in a product and not disclose it, it could be cockroach feet, it could be frog eyes. I mean, it could be anything. I think
Right.
it's just a way to, I think, freak people out and maybe hype themselves up as being the cockroach free coffee. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I get whole bean, so I grind my own coffee, thankfully, and I think that leaves out extra
Yeah,
roach feet.
trust me. I mean, the way we operate with all the food safety standards, I mean, there's absolutely no way I could see that being possible. So it sounds like a scare tactic in marketing, which is
Totally.
part of why I hate it about marketing. It's like, how do I compete against that? How do I know, like, say I'm cockroach free? It's crazy.
That's wild. I was like, why are people like sharing this? This is nuts. I mean, I'm still drinking coffee, but I'm like, this is like, anyway. Okay, so last few questions. Do
Sure.
you have a remedio you want to share with us?
Remedio. I mean, the old one, which I'm sure is very common in Latin America, is just the onion on the feet when you have a cough or congested or you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had a cut on my foot uh, that was getting infected, and my suegra made a concoction of blended garlic, honey, onions. Like she'll just put it, and it was like soaking my feet in, and it actually worked. Um,
Wow.
I think garlic is actually pretty magical. My son had an ear infection. We were in a remote farm in Guatemala years ago when he was little, and all I had was olive oil, garlic, and honey, and I
Y con
blended it
eso.
up. And yeah, I swear the
What?
garlic killed the ear infection.
Garlic is pretty magical, and I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. Okay, and do you have a quote or mantra that you live by right now?
always be yourself, always. And I want everybody around me to feel that whatever I create and develop, they can bring the whole selves to and be themselves. I think it's the only way we're happy.
Agreed. And do you have a productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share with us?
Um, well, my structure is I dream big. I kind of live a life of a period. I dream big. I put kind of midterm goals on myself and I break it down to dailies, which become my calendar. But I think the thing is like reach. Always reach for things. Always reach for growth, for knowledge, for impact. For if you're not reaching, you're not growing. If you're not growing, you're not moving
Mhm.
forward. So I think productivity is all about momentum.
Ooh, yes, I agree. And if I give you $100 and I was like, Martin, you have to multiply this, what would you do?
I mean, it'd have to be a business I run and manage, and it depends on how many multiples you want. But you know, in my business, it'll grow. It won't grow in a multiple. I think real estate. I've discovered and have started buying industrial real estate, and
That's a whole other conversation.
yeah, yeah, it's that's my generational plan for my children, which is it's just wild, and it's just. And look, and I have to be honest. I'm very privileged to have gotten myself financially to the point where I could get there. But I look back and I'm like, man, like how do we get our communities and our people to have that?
Mhm.
Because I saw a lot of people in communities that didn't look like us, but they had generational means. I want our people to do these things. I want our people not just in their homes. I want our people to own the building that their business is in, the building that their cousin's business is in, to create generational wealth. So I put in real estate.
I love that. I have a client who actually she's a multimillionaire and she does that for people, which I think it's the coolest thing. So she talked to someone who wanted to start a business and she needed a location. And she was like, I'll buy the building and rent it to you at a very, very low affordable because I want you to start it and I don't want the location to be a burden, which many times it is.
Right.
And she was able to do that because she made a ton of money.
Yeah. No, I want our people to be able to have those opportunities more. And uh, I'm trying to figure out how to shift more into that world. But I have a big goal for Mayorga and building Mayorga Coffee.
You'll get there. How exciting. This is so fun.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you so much for your conversation, for your work, for the coffee. Listeners, don't forget Mayorga Martin 15, no?
Martin15, MayorgaCoffee.com.
.com, and get your blends. I love the Mayan, but I have to check out others because you have some
Yes,
to
we
choose
have a lot
from.
of options. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Thank you so much for coming to Cava con Pam.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Bueno, listeners, are you like so ready and inspired to make things happen for you? After this interview, I was left with still a lot of questions. So I'm curious, first of all, if you would like, I mean, Martin is like so busy, so I don't know if, but I think he has so much knowledge, wisdom, experience that he can share with us and continue to build the legacy that he talked about. I learned so much. I hope you did too. Screenshot, tag us on socials, at Cafe Con Pan Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Please do let us know what you think of this episode. It's really, really fun to see your reactions to the post. It's really fun to get your comments because, frankly, me talking to a camera is like just talking to a camera. And so hearing you on the other side and knowing that you are on the other side does make a big, big difference. And so please do let us know what you think of this episode and leave some stars. So I would love if you feel called to support my work and the show and our stories. The easiest way to support the show is to go to the platform that you use to listen to podcasts and leave stars. 5 stars, highly appreciated. And if the platform allows, like Apple Podcasts and others, they let you leave a review, that also helps a ton. Because what that does is it invites other people to consider your words into then exploring Café con Pam and our stories. And the more reviews you leave, the more the algorithm picks up and continues to share Café con Pam with other people. And our goal for 2025, I know we're still in December, we're still in 2024, but our goal for 2025 is to increase our visibility and to make sure that more and more ears get to hear our stories because they are meant to be told from our perspective. I mean, literalmente, this interview with Martin, how he talked about the farmers and how typically they're portrayed and how that needs to change, very similar to that. I think our stories need to be shared from our perspective, and it's one of my intentions. So those are easy ways to support. If you feel called to support even further, we have Cafe con Pam ad-free, the Supporters Club, for $5 a month. You can get ad-free episodes, bonus episodes. You can get additional things. You can ask Q&As. You can ask Q&As now. And inside the Supporters Club, I share additional episodes that could be of support to you because my goal is also to provide and give you my body of work so that you are also receiving some benefit from it. So, Supporters Club for $5 a month. All you have to do is go to the link in the show notes. Remember, Martin gave us 15% off, so definitely get some Mayorga coffee. Check it out. It's amazing. Let me know what you think. Let me know which blend you get because they have some that are super cool. So, I talked about the Mayan blend that I had. Curious about your choices and what you think about it. Y bueno, listeners, if you are curious about the additional things I do and how we can work together and continue to stay in touch, head over to cafeconpam.com. That's where you will also find the episode notes for this episode. And let's stay in touch. I already mentioned the socials. Let me know what you think. Y como siempre, stay shining.
Sabrosura pa' ti que